A street kid sings at school and moves everyone with his natural talent. This boy from Detroit's toughest neighborhood had been invisible his entire life, selling sandwiches with his grandmother just to survive, when he made one decision that changed everything forever. In the rough neighborhoods of Detroit, Michigan, where broken streetlights cast long shadows over cracked sidewalks, lived a 14-year-old boy named Marcus Williams. Every morning, Marcus woke up at 6:30, not to catch the school bus like other kids, but to help his grandmother Helen sell homemade sandwiches from a small cart downtown. His grandmother was a 72-year-old woman with silver hair and hands weathered by years of hard work, but she always told Marcus one thing: "Boy, your voice is a gift from heaven, and gifts like that don't come around often," she would say while wrapping another sandwich in foil. Marcus didn't have fancy clothes or expensive sneakers like the popular kids at Roosevelt High School, but he had something most of them didn't have. His voice was something special, something that made people stop walking when they heard him humming while stacking bread at the cart. At school, Marcus usually kept to himself, sitting in the corner of the cafeteria with his worn-out backpack and secondhand textbooks. The other students barely noticed him, except when they wanted to make jokes about his old shoes or his grandmother's sandwich cart that everyone in the neighborhood knew about. But Marcus never let their words get to him, because every evening, when he got home to their small apartment above the corner store, his grandmother would ask him to sing. "Sing me that song again, baby," Helen would say, settling into her old rocking chair with a cup of coffee in her hands. One Tuesday afternoon, the school principal, Mr. Johnson, made an announcement over the intercom that would change everything for Marcus. "Attention students, next Friday we will be holding our annual spring talent show in the main auditorium at 7 o'clock, the principal announced with enthusiasm in his voice. "Any student who wants to participate should sign up at the main office before Thursday at 3 o'clock. And remember, this is your chance to shine." The cafeteria erupted with excitement as students immediately started talking about what they would do for the show. Some kids talked about doing dance routines they learned from social media. Others mentioned playing instruments they had been taking lessons for since they were little. Marcus just sat there quietly eating his peanut butter sandwich, but something inside him was stirring. Something he hadn't felt before. That evening, Marcus walked home through the familiar streets, past the corner barber shop where old men played chess, past the grocery store where his grandmother bought their weekly supplies. He could hear his grandmother's voice in his head, telling him about the gift he had, but he also heard the voices of his classmates, the ones who barely knew his name. When he got home, he found Helen in the kitchen, preparing tomorrow's sandwiches, her hands moving with the same steady rhythm they had for years. "Grandma," Marcus said quietly, standing in the doorway with his backpack still on his shoulders. "There's going to be a talent show at school on Friday, and I was thinking—" He paused, not sure if he should continue, but Helen looked up at him with those wise brown eyes that always seemed to see right through him. "You thinking about singing, baby?" Helen said, not as a question but as a statement, because she knew her grandson better than anyone else in the world. Marcus nodded slowly, still unsure if it was a good idea, still worried about what the other kids might think or say. "Marcus Williams, you listen to me good," Helen said, putting down her knife and walking over to him with purpose in her step. "I've been on this earth for 72 years, and I've heard a lot of voices, but yours is something different, something that touches people's souls." She placed her weathered hands on his shoulders and looked directly into his eyes with the kind of love only a grandmother can give. "Don't let fear stop you from sharing what God gave you, because the world needs to hear voices like yours, voices that come from the heart and tell the truth." The next morning, Marcus walked through the school hallways with a folded piece of paper in his pocket, his grandmother's words echoing in his mind like a song he couldn't forget. The main office was already crowded with students signing up for the talent show, their voices filling the small space with excitement and nervous energy. Marcus could see kids he recognized from his classes, popular students who always seemed confident about everything they did, athletes who commanded attention wherever they went. He stood at the back of the group, watching as names filled up the sign-up sheet, each one representing someone who felt they had something worth sharing with the school. When his turn finally came, Marcus stepped forward with shaking hands and wrote his name in careful letters. Marcus Williams, singing. The reaction was almost immediate, like a wave of whispers that spread through the small crowd of students still waiting to sign up. "Marcus Williams is gonna sing," said Ashley Chen, a cheerleader who had never spoken to him before, her voice carrying a tone of surprise mixed with something else. "I didn't even know he could talk, let alone sing," laughed Tyler Rodriguez, a basketball player who was signing up to do a slam dunk demonstration. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment, but he kept his head up and walked away from the office, clutching the straps of his backpack like they were lifelines. He had committed now, there was no turning back, and the thought both terrified and excited him at the same time. The rest of the day passed in a blur of classes and sideways glances from students who had heard about his sign-up. During lunch, Marcus sat at his usual table in the far corner of the cafeteria, trying to eat his sandwich while ignoring the stares and whispers from nearby tables. "Hey, Marcus," called out Jessica Thompson, a girl from his English class who had always been friendly but never really talked to him much. She walked over with her lunch tray, her blonde hair bouncing with each step, and sat down across from him with a genuine smile. "I heard you signed up for the talent show, that's really cool," she said, opening her bottle of water and looking at him with curiosity rather than judgment. Marcus looked up, surprised by her kindness, and managed a small smile in return. "Yeah, I'm gonna sing something," he replied quietly, still not entirely sure what song he would choose or how he would perform it. "What kind of song are you thinking about?" Jessica asked, taking a bite of her salad and waiting for his answer with patient interest. Marcus had been thinking about this question all morning, running through songs in his head trying to find something that felt right for his voice and the moment. "Maybe something old school, something my grandmother taught me," he said, his voice growing a little stronger as he talked about something close to his heart. "She's the one who got me into singing. She says music is like medicine for the soul." Jessica nodded thoughtfully, seeming genuinely interested in what he had to say, which was a new experience for Marcus at school. "That sounds beautiful. I bet you have a really good voice if your grandmother taught you," she said with encouragement that Marcus hadn't expected to receive from a classmate. That afternoon, after helping his grandmother close up the sandwich cart and count the day's earnings, Marcus sat in their small living room with an old guitar that had belonged to his grandfather. The instrument had seen better days, with scratches on its wooden body and strings that needed tuning every time he picked it up, but it still made beautiful music when played with care. Helen sat in her rocking chair, watching her grandson with the kind of pride that only comes from seeing someone you love pursue their dreams despite the obstacles. "What song you gonna sing for them kids, baby?" she asked, her voice soft but filled with anticipation for his answer. Marcus strummed a few chords, feeling the familiar comfort of the guitar in his hands, and began to hum a melody that had been in his family for generations. "I was thinking about Stand By Me, Grandma, the way you taught it to me with all the soul and feeling you put into it," he said, looking up at her with hope in his eyes. The days leading up to the talent show passed like a whirlwind of nervous energy and quiet preparation for Marcus, who spent every spare moment practicing his song in the privacy of his bedroom. He would sit on the edge of his bed with his grandfather's old guitar, strumming the familiar chords and singing softly so the neighbors wouldn't hear through the thin walls. His grandmother would sometimes stand outside his door, listening with a smile on her weathered face, remembering her own father who used to play the same song on the front porch of their old house in Alabama. "That boy's got something special," she would whisper to herself, knowing that Friday night would be a turning point in her grandson's life. Marcus could feel the weight of the upcoming performance growing heavier each day, but instead of backing down, he found himself getting more determined to show his classmates who he really was beneath the quiet exterior. On Thursday evening, Marcus walked through downtown Detroit after helping his grandmother pack up the sandwich cart, the city lights reflecting off the windows of tall buildings and the sounds of traffic filling the air around him. He stopped at the small music store where he sometimes went to look at instruments he couldn't afford, pressing his face against the glass window to see the shiny guitars and keyboards displayed inside. "One day I'm going to have a guitar like that," he said to himself, pointing at a beautiful acoustic guitar with mother-of-pearl inlays around the sound hole. The store owner, an elderly man named Mr. Patterson, saw him through the window and waved him inside with a friendly gesture. "You're Helen's grandson, aren't you?" the old man said, recognizing Marcus from the neighborhood where everyone knew everyone else's business. "Yes, sir. I'm Marcus," he replied politely, the way his grandmother had taught him to speak to adults with respect and good manners that seemed old-fashioned to his classmates. Mr. Patterson nodded approvingly and gestured toward the guitars hanging on the wall, their polished surfaces gleaming under the store's fluorescent lights. "Your grandmother told me you've got a voice that could make angels weep," the store owner said with a chuckle. his eyes twinkling with the kind of wisdom that comes from years of listening to young musicians chase their dreams. "She mentioned you're performing at school tomorrow night. How are you feeling about that?" he asked, genuinely interested in Marcus's answer. Marcus shifted nervously from one foot to the other, his hands fidgeting with the hem of his jacket as he thought about how to respond honestly. "I'm scared, Mr. Patterson," Marcus admitted, his voice barely above a whisper as he looked down at his worn-out sneakers on the music store's carpeted floor. "Most of the kids at school don't even know I exist, and now I'm going to get up in front of everybody and sing." The older man nodded understandingly, having heard similar fears from countless young musicians over the years he had owned the store. "Let me tell you something, son," Mr. Patterson said, walking over to one of the guitars and gently taking it down from its hook on the wall. "Fear is just excitement without breath, and the best performances come from people who are willing to be vulnerable in front of others." He handed the guitar to Marcus, who carefully took it in his hands, feeling the smooth wood and perfectly tuned strings. "This here is a 1978 Martin. Belonged to a young man who was just as scared as you are right now." Aginan, the guitar felt different from his grandfather's old instrument, lighter somehow, with a richer tone that seemed to resonate through Marcus's entire body when he strummed the first chord. "What happened to the young man who owned it?" Marcus asked, running his fingers along the guitar's neck and marveling at how easily the strings responded to his touch. Mr. Patterson smiled with the kind of expression that suggested a story worth telling, settling into a chair behind the counter, as if he had all the time in the world. "That young man was scared just like you, but he went ahead and sang anyway, and it changed his whole life," the store owner said, watching Marcus's face carefully for his reaction. "He became one of the most successful musicians in Detroit, traveled all over the world, but he never forgot where he came from, or the people who believed in him." Marcus looked up from the guitar, his eyes wide with possibility and hope, wondering if his own story might have a similar ending. Friday morning arrived with an unseasonable warmth that seemed to promise something special in the air, and Marcus woke up earlier than usual, his stomach churning with a mixture of excitement and terror. He could hear his grandmother already moving around in the kitchen, preparing breakfast and humming one of her old gospel songs that always made their small apartment feel like home. "Morning, baby. You ready for your big day?" Helen called out when she heard him stirring in his bedroom, her voice carrying the same steady confidence that had gotten them through so many difficult times together. Marcus pulled on his best pair of jeans and the button-down shirt his grandmother had ironed for him the night before, looking at himself in the cracked mirror above his dresser and trying to see what she saw when she looked at him. He took a deep breath, straightened his shoulders, and walked into the kitchen where the smell of bacon and eggs filled the air with comfort and familiarity. At school, the hallways buzzed with energy as students talked about the talent show that would take place in just a few hours, their voices echoing off the lockers with anticipation and excitement. Marcus noticed that several of his classmates looked at him differently now, some with curiosity, others with what might have been respect for his courage in signing up to perform. During his first period history class, Mr. Thompson, the teacher who had always been kind to Marcus, pulled him aside after the lesson ended and the other students had filed out to their next classes. "I heard you're performing tonight, Marcus," the teacher said, adjusting his glasses and looking at his student with genuine interest and support. "I've been teaching here for 25 years, and I can always tell when a student has something special inside them." Marcus felt his cheeks warm with embarrassment and pride at the same time, not used to receiving this kind of attention from adults at school. "Thank you, Mr. Thompson," Marcus replied, shifting his backpack to his other shoulder and wondering what his teacher might have seen in him that others had missed. The older man smiled and placed a gentle hand on Marcus's shoulder, the kind of gesture that teachers reserve for students they believe in completely. "Whatever you sing tonight, just remember that your voice matters and there are people in that audience who need to hear what you have to say," he said with conviction that surprised Marcus with its intensity. "Don't let nerves steal your moment because moments like these don't come around very often." Marcus nodded thoughtfully, filing away the teacher's words in his memory alongside his grandmother's encouragement and Mr. Patterson's wisdom from the music store. The rest of the school day passed in a blur of classes and conversations, with Marcus barely able to concentrate on anything except the performance that waited for him that evening. After school, Marcus walked home through the familiar streets of his neighborhood, noticing details he usually overlooked. The way the afternoon sunlight hit the windows of the apartment buildings, the sound of children playing in the small park near his street, the smell of dinner cooking in homes where families were gathering around tables. When he reached his grandmother's sandwich cart, she was already packing up for the day, moving with the efficient motions of someone who had done the same routine for years without complaint. "How you feeling, baby?" she asked without looking up from her work, knowing her grandson well enough to sense his nervous energy from across the street. "Like I might throw up," Marcus answered honestly, earning a hearty laugh from Helen that made him feel slightly better about the whole situation. That evening, as Marcus stood in front of the bathroom mirror trying to comb his hair into something resembling a style, he could hear his grandmother moving around the apartment, getting ready to attend his performance. She had closed the sandwich cart early and asked their neighbor, Mrs. Garcia, to watch it while they went to the school, something she had never done before in all the years Marcus had known her. "Grandma, you don't have to come if you don't want to," Marcus called out, though he secretly hoped she wouldn't take him up on the offer to stay home. "Boy, you must be out of your mind if you think I'm gonna miss seeing my grandson sing in front of all them people," Helen called back from her bedroom, her voice filled with determination and pride. "I've been waiting for this day since you were 5 years old and used to sing along with the radio while I cooked dinner." The sound of her voice, strong and confident, gave Marcus the courage he needed to face whatever was waiting for him at Roosevelt High School. The Roosevelt High School auditorium was packed with students, parents, and teachers by 7 o'clock that evening, the red velvet seats filled with an audience ready to be entertained by their friends and classmates. The stage was lit with bright spotlights that cast everything in sharp relief, making the space feel both magical and intimidating at the same time. Marcus sat backstage with the other performers, his hands sweating as he listened to the sounds of the crowd settling in for the show, their voices creating a low hum of anticipation that seemed to vibrate through the walls. His grandmother had found a seat in the third row, her silver hair reflecting the stage lights as she waved at him through the small gap in the curtains, her smile giving him strength when his nerves threatened to overwhelm him. He clutched his grandfather's old guitar, feeling the familiar weight of the instrument in his hands and drawing comfort from its worn wooden surface. The show began with Ashley Chen and her cheerleading squad performing a perfectly choreographed dance routine to the latest pop song, their movements synchronized and energetic as the audience clapped along enthusiastically. Next came Tyler Rodriguez with his basketball demonstration, dribbling and shooting with the skill that had made him famous throughout the school, earning cheers and applause from his teammates in the audience. Marcus watched from the wings as performer after performer took the stage, each one receiving warm responses from the crowd, and he began to wonder if his simple song would be enough to hold their attention. "You're up next, Marcus," said Miss Rodriguez, the drama teacher who was coordinating the show, her voice gentle but urgent as she handed him a wireless microphone that felt foreign and intimidating in his hands. Marcus walked to the center of the stage, the bright lights momentarily blinding him as he tried to see the faces in the audience, but all he could make out were shadowy figures sitting in darkness beyond the spotlights. He adjusted the guitar strap across his shoulder and stepped up to the microphone stand, his heart beating so hard he was sure everyone in the auditorium could hear it echoing through the sound system. The crowd grew quiet, waiting to see what this unknown student would do, some of them probably expecting another pop song or maybe a comedy routine based on his reputation as the quiet kid from the corner of the cafeteria. "Hi, everyone," Marcus said into the microphone, his voice barely above a whisper at first, then growing stronger as he found his confidence. "I'm Marcus Williams, and I want to sing a song my grandmother taught me, something that means a lot to both of us." He strummed the first chord on his grandfather's guitar, the sound ringing out clear and true through the auditorium's excellent acoustics, and then he began to sing "Stand By Me," the way Helen had taught him, with all the soul and emotion that the song deserved. His voice started soft and uncertain, but as he reached the chorus, something magical happened. The nervousness fell away, replaced by the pure joy of making music and sharing something beautiful with other people. The audience grew completely still, as if they were afraid that moving or breathing too loudly might break the spell that Marcus was weaving with his voice and his grandfather's old guitar. Even the students, who had never paid attention to him before, found themselves leaning forward in their seats, drawn in by the raw honesty and surprising power of his performance. When Marcus reached the final verse of the song, his voice soared through the auditorium with a strength and clarity that surprised even him, the guitar providing a gentle foundation for the melody that seemed to come from somewhere deep in his soul. He could see his grandmother in the third row, tears streaming down her weathered cheeks as she watched her grandson fulfill the dreams she had nurtured for so many years with love and patience. The last note faded into silence, and for a moment that stretched like eternity, the entire auditorium was completely quiet, as if everyone was processing what they had just witnessed. Then someone started clapping, and within seconds the entire crowd was on their feet, giving Marcus the kind of standing ovation usually reserved for professional performers, their applause echoing off the walls like thunder. Marcus stood there holding his guitar, overwhelmed by the response, his eyes finding his grandmother's face in the crowd and seeing the pride and joy that made everything worth it. As Marcus walked off the stage, still carrying his grandfather's guitar and trying to process what had just happened, he was immediately surrounded by classmates who had never spoken to him before that night. "Dude, that was incredible," said Kevin Martinez, a popular senior who was known for being selective about who he considered cool enough to acknowledge in the hallways. "Where did you learn to sing like that?" asked Sarah Johnson, her eyes wide with genuine admiration as she looked at Marcus like she was seeing him for the first time. Marcus felt overwhelmed by all the attention, his hands shaking slightly as he tried to respond to everyone talking to him at once. But before he could say anything, he felt a gentle tap on his shoulder. He turned around to see a tall man in his 40s wearing a navy blue suit and a warm smile, someone he didn't recognize from the school faculty or the parent volunteers he had seen around campus. "Marcus, my name is David Chen, and I'm a talent scout for Harmony Records here in Detroit," the man said, extending his hand for a professional handshake that made Marcus feel suddenly very adult and important. "I was here tonight to watch my niece Ashley perform with the cheerleading squad, but I have to tell you, your performance was the most authentic thing I've heard in years." Marcus stared at him in disbelief, wondering if this was some kind of joke or dream that would disappear if he blinked too hard. "You have a natural talent that can't be taught, son," David continued, reaching into his jacket pocket and pulling out a business card with gold lettering that caught the light from the stage. "I'd like to talk to you and your family about some opportunities that might interest you, if you're willing to listen." Marcus took the card with trembling hands, reading the words, Harmony Records and Artist Development, without fully understanding what they meant for his future. Behind them, the talent show continued with more performances, but Marcus barely noticed as Jessica Thompson approached him with her parents, who looked like the kind of successful professionals he usually only saw on television. "Marcus, these are my parents, Dr. and Mrs. Thompson," she said with obvious pride in her voice, as if introducing him was an honor rather than an obligation. "We wanted to tell you how much we enjoyed your performance tonight," said Dr. Thompson, a distinguished woman with kind eyes and a firm handshake. "Jessica has mentioned you're being raised by your grandmother, and we think she's done an absolutely wonderful job," Mrs. Thompson added, her voice carrying the same warmth that her daughter had shown Marcus during their lunch conversation earlier that week. Marcus felt his cheeks burn with embarrassment and pride at the same time, not used to receiving compliments from adults who didn't know his family personally. "Thank you, ma'am," Marcus replied politely, the way Helen had taught him to address adults, especially those who seemed important or successful in ways his family had never been. "My grandmother Helen is here tonight. She's sitting in the third row if you'd like to meet her," he said, gesturing toward where he had last seen her silver hair reflecting the stage lights. "We'd be honored to meet her," Dr. Thompson said with genuine enthusiasm, and the small group made their way through the crowd of people still mingling after the performances had ended. When they reached Helen's seat, she was already standing and wiping tears from her eyes with the embroidered handkerchief she always carried in her purse, the one with tiny flowers that Marcus remembered from his earliest childhood. "Grandma, these are some people who wanted to meet you," Marcus said, his voice filled with pride as he introduced the Thompsons to the woman who had raised him with nothing but love and determination. Helen stood up straighter, smoothing down her best dress and extending her hand with the kind of dignity that impressed everyone who met her, regardless of their social status or bank account balance. "I'm Helen Williams, Marcus's grandmother," she said with quiet confidence, her voice carrying the strength that had gotten them through so many difficult years together. "He gets his musical talent from his grandfather. God rest his soul, but the heart he puts into it, that's all his own." Dr. Thompson smiled warmly and shook Helen's hand with obvious respect, recognizing the kind of woman who had raised a young man with such character and talent, despite facing challenges most people never had to overcome. "Mrs. Williams, you've raised an exceptional young man," she said sincerely, her words carrying weight because they came from someone who clearly understood the value of good parenting. "We hope you're as proud of him tonight as we are impressed by his performance." The following Monday morning at Roosevelt High School felt completely different for Marcus, as if someone had adjusted the lens through which everyone viewed him over the weekend. Students he had never spoken to before stopped him in the hallways to congratulate him on his performance, and teachers who had barely noticed him in previous years now smiled and nodded when they passed him between classes. "Marcus, wait up," I called out Tyler Rodriguez, the basketball star, jogging to catch up with him near the main entrance, his athletic bag slung over his shoulder and a genuine smile on his face. "Man, I owe you an apology for what I said when you signed up for the talent show," he said, extending his fist for a bump that Marcus accepted with surprise and growing confidence. "I had no idea you could sing like that. You totally blew everyone away," Tyler continued, his words carrying none of the mockery that Marcus had expected, but instead a respect he had never experienced from the popular kids at school. During lunch, Marcus found himself sitting at a table in the center of the cafeteria, instead of his usual corner spot, surrounded by students who wanted to hear about his experience on stage and his plans for the future. "So are you going to try out for American Idol or something?" asked Brandon Cooper, a sophomore who played guitar in the school's jazz band and had always seemed too cool to notice freshmen like Marcus. "I don't know. I never really thought about stuff like that," Marcus replied honestly, unwrapping the sandwich his grandmother had made him that morning and marveling at how normal conversation felt when people actually wanted to listen to what he had to say. "You should definitely think about it," said Amanda Foster, a senior who was known for her beautiful singing voice and her starring roles in the school's musical productions. "You have something special, Marcus, something that could take you places if you're willing to work for it." That afternoon, Marcus walked home with David Chen's business card in his pocket and a head full of possibilities he had never allowed himself to imagine before Friday night. When he reached his grandmother's sandwich cart, she was serving her regular customers with the same friendly efficiency she had maintained for years, but he could see a new light in her eyes when she looked at him. "How was school today, baby?" she asked, handing change to Mr. Johnson from the auto repair shop down the street, who had been buying lunch from her cart since Marcus was in elementary school. "Different, Grandma. Really different," Marcus replied, helping her restock the napkin dispenser and thinking about how to explain the changes he was feeling inside and around him. "Good different or bad different?" Helen asked with the knowing smile of someone who already suspected the answer, but wanted to hear it from her grandson anyway. "Good different," Marcus said, his voice stronger and more confident than it had been just a few days earlier, as if performing on stage had unlocked something inside him that he hadn't known was there. "People are actually talking to me now, treating me like I matter, like I have something important to offer." Helen nodded approvingly, remembering her own youth and the moments when everything had changed for her in ways both big and small. "That's because they finally got to see what I've been seeing all these years," she said, wrapping another sandwich in foil with practiced efficiency while keeping one eye on her grandson's face. "Talent has a way of opening doors, Marcus, but it's what you do after you walk through them that really counts." Her words carried the wisdom of someone who had lived through enough changes to know that opportunities were precious and should never be taken for granted or wasted on foolish choices. That evening, as Marcus sat in their small living room with his grandfather's guitar, practicing songs and thinking about the conversation he wanted to have with his grandmother about David Chen's business card, Helen settled into her rocking chair with a cup of tea and the kind of expression that suggested important things were about to be discussed. "Tell me about that man in the suit who gave you his card," she said without preamble, because she had been thinking about him all weekend and wondering what his interest in her grandson might mean for their future together. Marcus pulled the card from his pocket and handed it to her, watching her face carefully as she read the gold lettering and processed what it might represent. "He said he's a talent scout for a record company, and he wants to talk to us about opportunities," Marcus explained, his voice carrying both excitement and uncertainty about what such opportunities might require from them. The meeting with David Chen took place the following Wednesday afternoon at a small coffee shop downtown, chosen because it was neutral territory where Helen and Marcus would feel comfortable discussing their future without the pressure of being in a fancy office building. David arrived exactly on time, carrying a leather portfolio and wearing the same warm smile that had impressed Marcus on the night of the talent show, his professional appearance balanced by a genuine friendliness that put both grandmother and grandson at ease. "Thank you both for agreeing to meet with me," he said, shaking Helen's hand with obvious respect, before turning to Marcus with an encouraging nod. "I've been thinking about your performance all weekend, Marcus, And I believe you have the kind of authentic talent that could really connect with people if developed properly." Helen listened carefully, her weathered hands folded on the table as she studied this man who was offering her grandson opportunities she had only dreamed about during the long years of raising him alone. "What exactly are you proposing, Mr. Chen?" Helen asked directly, her voice carrying the protective instincts of someone who had learned to be cautious about people making big promises to her family. David appreciated her straightforward approach and opened his portfolio to reveal contracts and promotional materials that looked both exciting and intimidating to Marcus, who had never seen anything like them before. Harmony Records has a youth development program designed specifically for talented young people like Marcus, he explained, pointing to photographs of other teenage artists who had started with the company and gone on to successful careers. "We provide professional vocal coaching, songwriting workshops, studio time, and performance opportunities, all while making sure our artists continue their education and maintain strong family connections." The words sounded almost too good to be true to Marcus, who had never imagined that someone would want to invest time and money in developing his abilities. "How much would this cost us?" Helen asked because she knew that programs like this usually required significant financial investments that families like theirs simply couldn't afford, no matter how much they wanted to support their children's dreams. David smiled and shook his head, understanding her concern completely after years of working with families from all economic backgrounds. "There's no cost to you, Mrs. Williams," he said gently, watching relief wash over her face as the words sank in. "The program is funded by the record company as an investment in future talent, and if Marcus develops into a recording artist, the company recoups its investment through his eventual success." He went on to explain that Marcus would attend regular school during the day and participate in music development activities in the evenings and on weekends, allowing him to pursue his dreams without sacrificing his education or his relationship with his grandmother. Marcus looked at his grandmother, seeing the mixture of hope and worry in her brown eyes as she processed this information that could change both of their lives in ways they were still trying to understand. "What do you think, Grandma?" he asked quietly, knowing that her opinion mattered more to him than anything else in the world, including his own excitement about the opportunities being offered. Helen reached across the table and took his hand in hers, the same hands that had worked so hard for so many years to provide for him and give him the foundation he needed to reach this moment. "I think God has been preparing you for this your whole life, baby," she said softly, her voice filled with the kind of love that had sustained them through every difficult day and sleepless night. "But I also think we need to pray about it and make sure we're making the right decision for the right reasons." David nodded approvingly at Helen's wisdom, respecting her desire to think carefully about such an important decision, rather than rushing into something that would affect her grandson's entire future. "Take all the time you need," he said, closing his portfolio and pulling out another business card with his direct phone number written on the back. "This opportunity will be here when you're ready, and I want you both to feel completely comfortable with any decision you make." As they walked home through the familiar streets of their neighborhood, Marcus felt like he was seeing everything with new eyes, noticing details that had always been there, but somehow looked different now that his future might take him beyond these blocks he had known his entire life. Helen walked beside him in thoughtful silence, already planning the conversations they would need to have and the questions they would need to answer before making such a life-changing decision. After 3 days of prayer, family discussions, and careful consideration of all the possibilities and risks involved, Helen and Marcus called David Chen to schedule a follow-up meeting where they would give him their answer about the youth development program. The second meeting took place at Harmony Records' downtown Detroit office, a converted warehouse space filled with gold and platinum albums on the walls, state-of-the-art recording equipment visible through glass windows, and the kind of creative energy that made Marcus feel like he was stepping into a different world entirely. "We've decided that Marcus should be part of your program," Helen announced with quiet dignity, her decision clearly made after serious thought and discussion with her grandson about what would be best for his future and their family relationship. David smiled broadly and stood up to shake both of their hands, his enthusiasm genuine and infectious as he welcomed Marcus officially into the Harmony Records family of developing artists. The first few weeks of the program were both exciting and overwhelming for Marcus, who found himself working with vocal coaches who had trained Grammy-winning artists, songwriters who had written hit songs for major recording stars, and producers who understood how to capture the authentic quality of his voice that had impressed everyone at the talent show. "Your natural instincts are excellent, Marcus," said Patricia Williams, a vocal coach who had worked with some of the biggest names in the music industry over her 20-year career. We're not here to change what makes you special. We're here to help you develop the technical skills that will allow you to share your gift with larger audiences more effectively. Marcus practiced scales and breathing exercises that strengthened his voice, learned about microphone technique and stage presence, and began writing his own songs with the help of professional songwriters who respected his authentic style and life experiences. His first professional recording session took place on a Saturday morning in November, just 2 months after his talent show performance had changed everything for him and his grandmother. Marcus stood in a sound booth that was larger and more sophisticated than anything he had ever imagined, wearing headphones that allowed him to hear his voice with perfect clarity and surrounded by equipment that cost more than his family had ever owned. "Just sing the way you did that night at school, Marcus," said James Rodriguez, the producer who was working on his demo recording, his voice coming through the headphones with encouraging warmth. "Don't think about the technology or the pressure. Just connect with the song the way you always have." Marcus closed his eyes and began to sing "Stand By Me" again, but this time his voice was captured with professional quality that revealed every nuance and emotion he put into the performance. When the session was over and Marcus listened to the playback through studio monitors that made his voice sound richer and more powerful than he had ever heard it before, he felt a mixture of pride and disbelief that this was actually happening to him. "That's going to be your first single, Marcus," David Chen said with obvious satisfaction as they sat in the control room reviewing the recording that would soon be heard by radio programmers and music industry professionals across the country. "We're going to start with local radio stations here in Detroit, then expand to other markets if the response is positive." Helen sat beside her grandson, tears of joy streaming down her cheeks as she listened to his voice coming through the expensive speakers, knowing that this was just the beginning of a journey that would take him far beyond anything they had ever dreamed possible together. "Your grandfather would be so proud of you, baby," she whispered, her voice filled with all the love and sacrifice that had brought them to this incredible moment. The single was released to Detroit radio stations in December, just 3 months after Marcus had nervously signed up for his school's talent show, and the response exceeded everyone's expectations, including those of the industry professionals who had worked with him. "We're getting requests for interviews and live performance bookings," David told Marcus and Helen during their weekly check-in meeting at the record company office, his excitement evident as he shared news about radio play and positive reviews from music critics who had been impressed by Marcus's authentic style and genuine emotion. "There's already talk about a full album if this momentum continues, and several major venues have expressed interest in having Marcus perform as an opening act for established artists." Marcus listened to all of this information with amazement, still hardly able to believe that his simple song at a school talent show had led to opportunities that seemed like they belonged in someone else's life rather than his own. 6 months after that life-changing talent show performance, Marcus Williams found himself standing on the stage of the historic Fox Theater in downtown Detroit, preparing to perform as the opening act for a Grammy-nominated artist whose music he had listened to for years. The venue seated over 4,000 people, and as Marcus looked out at the sea of faces in the ornate auditorium, he could see his grandmother Helen in the front row, wearing her best dress and the kind of proud smile that made all of his hard work and dedication feel worthwhile. "Ladies and gentlemen, please welcome Detroit's own rising star, Marcus Williams." The announcer's voice boomed through the theater's sound system, and the crowd erupted in applause that seemed to shake the building's historic foundations. Marcus stepped up to the microphone, carrying his grandfather's old guitar that had traveled with him through every performance and recording session, a reminder of where he had come from and the love that had made his success possible. He began with "Stand By Me," the song that had started it all, but now he performed it with the confidence and technical skill he had developed through months of professional coaching and regular performances at venues across Michigan and Ohio. His voice filled every corner of the massive theater, reaching the balcony seats with the same authentic emotion that had moved his classmates at Roosevelt High School, but now enhanced by the kind of professional presentation that could compete with major recording artists. The audience was completely silent during his performance, hanging on every note and word, and when he finished the song, the standing ovation lasted for several minutes, with people in the expensive orchestra seats cheering just as enthusiastically as the teenagers in the cheaper balcony sections. "Thank you, Detroit, you'll always be home," Marcus said into the microphone, his words carrying genuine gratitude and the kind of humility that had endeared him to fans across the Midwest. After the show, Marcus was surrounded backstage by music industry executives, booking agents, and journalists who wanted to interview the young man, whose rise to success had become an inspiring story that resonated with people facing their own challenges and dreams. "Marcus, how does it feel to go from singing at a school talent show to opening at the Fox Theater in just 6 months?" asked Rebecca Martinez from Detroit Music Magazine, her digital recorder capturing his response for an article that would be read by thousands of aspiring musicians across the country. "It feels like a dream, but also like something that was meant to happen if I was willing to work for it," Marcus replied thoughtfully, his words carrying the wisdom of someone who had learned to appreciate both the opportunities he had been given and the people who had supported him along the way. "My grandmother always told me that talent is just the starting point, and everything else depends on what you're willing to do with the chances you get." As the evening wound down and the theater began to empty, Marcus found himself alone with Helen in his dressing room, both of them still processing the magnitude of what had just happened and what it meant for their future together. "I'm so proud of you, baby," she said, reaching up to straighten his collar the way she had done since he was a small child, her weathered hands gentle and loving, despite all the changes that success had brought to their lives. "But I'm even more proud of the young man you've become, someone who remembers where he came from and treats people with kindness no matter how famous he gets." Marcus hugged his grandmother tightly, breathing in the familiar scent of her perfume and feeling grateful for the foundation of love and values she had given him that no amount of success could ever replace. "None of this would have happened without you, Grandma," he said softly, meaning every word with the kind of sincerity that had made his music so powerful and authentic from the very beginning. Outside the Fox Theater, fans were still gathered hoping for autographs and photos, their voices calling Marcus's name with the kind of enthusiasm usually reserved for established stars rather than newcomers to the music industry. "Marcus, when is your album coming out?" shouted one teenage girl who had been waiting since before the show started, her excitement genuine and infectious as she held up her phone to record his response. "We're working on it now, should be ready by next summer," Marcus replied, taking time to sign autographs and pose for pictures with fans who had supported him from his earliest performances at local venues. As he and Helen finally made their way to the car that would take them home to their same apartment above the corner store, Marcus realized that success hadn't changed the most important things in his life: his love for music, his gratitude for the people who believed in him, and his determination to use his talents to make a positive difference in the world around him. Today, Marcus Williams has released 2 successful albums, performed at venues across the United States, and established a scholarship fund for young musicians from low-income families who need support to develop their talents. He still lives in Detroit with his grandmother Helen, who closed her sandwich cart to become his full-time manager, and the person who keeps him grounded no matter how busy his career becomes. Every year, Marcus returns to Roosevelt High School to perform at their annual talent show, encouraging students to pursue their dreams regardless of their background or the obstacles they might face. "The only difference between a dream and a goal," he tells them, "is having the courage to take the first step even when you're scared." His story reminds us that sometimes the most extraordinary journeys begin with ordinary moments of courage, when someone decides to share their authentic self with the world despite their fears and doubts. Marcus's voice continues to reach new audiences every day, but he has never forgotten the lesson his grandmother taught him: that the most powerful music comes from the heart and connects us all through the universal language of hope, love, and perseverance. If Marcus's story touched your heart, remember that there are young people in your own community who have incredible talents waiting to be discovered and nurtured. Sometimes all it takes is one person believing in them, one opportunity to shine, or one moment of courage to change a life forever. Share this story with someone who needs to hear it today, because you never know whose dreams might be waiting for just the right encouragement to take flight. Don't forget to subscribe to our channel for more inspiring stories like this one, and let us know in the comments about a time when someone believed in you when you needed it most.